Hello, I'm Helen Van Wyck, and welcome to my studio. Yes, another lesson about painting, and this time all about white, and some other things that I think are terribly important. I would like to go back to the basics, and what better way to do so than to let's get acquainted with my studio again. Here's my easel that props my canvas up perpendicular to the floor, not tilted back. If it were tilted back, I might have to encounter a glare. You see, if it's tilted back, there, see, this tilt, oh, there, oh, that's so awful to have to fight. You can't see your colors, you can't see your shapes, and, well, you can't see anything. And so an easel that is a tripod type that tilts that canvas backwards makes you have to work under this kind of a disadvantage. The best kind of easel is one that tilts it, has it perpendicular or absolutely tilted towards you. Look how now you can see the colors and the fact that this is a picture of 3 robin's eggs. And so be careful about the way you choose your easel, because it's your workhorse. Easel means is a takeoff word on ezel, which means donkey. Is the word, the Holland word for donkey, ezel. And so this is my workhorse. That's how it's got its name. So now, what else can I tell you about how the important factors of a studio? You need a taboret, some place that you can have some of your equipment very handy. I always hold a palette, but sometimes I have to put it down. And so I'm going to be working in a special way today. This is why I have a white palette, not my usual arty looking palette. And then we have, of course, the subject matter. And I like to have it this distance away from me, and I set it up on a contraption, and my contraption is I can tilt it this way and that way. It also raises up and raises down so that I can get the view that I want, because very often the perspective at which you see something is just what you want. You say, oh, I like it that way. And of course, a studio has to have proper lighting. What is proper lighting? One source of light, so that you can see the contrasts of light and dark, because that's the only way you can be able to paint, is to see light and dark. And that's the way our world is. We do have one source of light, the sun, hallelujah, and that's the way we recognize things. And so my light is coming down and hitting this and really slamming its illumination onto it. Now watch me take it away with the shadow of my hand. See, now that proves that I am not really seeing it. I'm seeing how the light is striking it. See that? Okay? Now, if you don't have a studio, you can make any room into a studio by putting a tripod or some kind of stand here and attaching a spotlight so that it takes the place of the direct light from a window. Okay? Now, that's about what reviews the situation or my atmosphere, my study. And now I'm at the easel, and what am I looking at? No, I'm not going to start with the color white, colorful white. I'm going to start with something that is more important. You are all interested in color. I can tell by your questions. I can tell by your letters. What color do you? Always asking about color. You want to learn that, but I don't want to teach you that. I want to teach you something more important. The whole importance of the picture-making process, which always starts with the composition. And that is the arrangement of how you have the subject situated on the canvas so there's a wonderful place that you want to look, because it's all designed for that. It's the focal point. Now, I cheated a little bit. I'm not going to be doing that as though I've never done it before. I did it ahead of time to show you. to show you what I'm aiming for when I demonstrate the process that I used. I want to end up with something like this, and I do it by thinking out how I can do it. So I'm going to show you in a step-by-step procedure how I got to this. What do I have in this? Well, this is the focal point. I think that's what you look at. And this here and this here was designed purposely to set that off. These lights and these lights, don't ignore that. They're not there just because they're there. They're here because of this, the important thing about the picture. This is a precious picture of mine. I've had it for years and years, and I like it because it's such a basic shape. It's practically a circle. So let me show you step one. Step one of getting to the finished product. I have a palette with black and white acrylic paint. I thin it down with water, and I use it because it's fast drying, so that I have an isolated coat on the canvas to initiate what I want to end up with. If I did it in oil, I'd have wet paint, and I can't work onto wet paint easily. Don't you find working wet into wet kind of difficult? Everything all gets, well, if you don't do it right, it gets all muddy. And so let's start out by placing the subject. I don't want this picture to get any higher than there. That's a good place to start. Then I think I'm going to let this go out of the canvas on this particular one. So I think I'll put a line here to indicate that. And relegate the complexity of the subject into a basic overall design. And this is going to be where the pot is. Remember I said I love it because it's such a basic shape, a ball. People say, how can you do that without a compass? I says, comes from years of drinking. And it is good to look at your shapes as what they are basically. You could use a compass if you wanted to. That would commit you to making everything rather correct, though. And so now it's dug out. It's dug out there, which then makes that part show. And a center line is always a good idea to even put in, because it helps you make it a little even on both sides, because this has a base, so from here to here and from here to here has to be the same. I don't see this picture and the drape separately. I see it as an arrangement. And so I function with my paint according to how I see the arrangement. And I see these shadows from on the drape emanating from the drape, from the picture, and that's where I would start. I can't start with the cut work. That's not as important as these wonderful lights and darks that come and surround this little picture. This little picture actually is a gravy boat. It has a funny little thing up here, which I always never put in because it's so odd. I don't like to paint things that are odd. People say, "What is that?" And then you have to sign it. This is a gravy boat, not a picture, because of that little thing and right there. I don't know whether you can see it. It's the lip has a thing across here to stop the fat from coming out, which doesn't work. It skims the fat off the top of the gravy. It was invented even before cholesterol. No, I think this comes deeper in this particular arrangement because I like the fact that that cast shadow goes behind that drape. I'm not thinking of the fact that that drape is linen or that it has a pattern. I'm not thinking of anything. All I'm thinking of is the design that it is. I see a shape here, then I see this coming in front of it. That little piece of material cutting in front of that shadow will help me make this look as though it's in front of that. I would never put it, well, I'll talk about that later. And so now that indicates it enough. Remember, I'm planning this out. I'm not painting it, I'm planning it. Just like a builder makes a plan and a blueprint and so on before he calls in the carpenters. And so I'm planning out the overall design. Now, you'll see that I have just a box as a background, but I don't think that tone of box is the tone I want to show this off. That's why I'm painting this. I'm painting it to show off this lovely shape. So I want to choose a background that will do so. So often people feel that painting has to be just recording what he sees. No, you take what you see and decide that it's a point of reference for what you want. Because whatever Lola wants, Lola can have when you have a paintbrush in your hand because it's never been done before. This is my picture. I can do with it what I want. And I want people to appreciate that shape. And I think a darker background would show it off better. Just remember, it's your picture. It's not the subject's picture. I mean, I can't help but quote Whistler again and again and again when he said, walked up to one of his students' paintings and he said, looked at it this way. She says, but I'm only painting what I see. She said, you should see what you're painting. Because that's all going to be dismantled and no one really cares. But they care about the painting you do. So that's what you should care about. And I thought I might as well balance that background with that dark shadow here to see how it looks. Why don't I get rid of, well, I have to put this in dark and I have to put this in dark too. That keeps your eye in here. And I always start on a tone canvas. I didn't start on white, I started on gray. So with gray as a middle tone, and I see darks because of the light, and I see light because of the light. I have light and dark, and I already have in between. So it makes it a little easier to push, to really push the contrast onto the canvas quickly to see how the design looks. I'm not saying that you should rush. Don't ever rush your paintings. Just be efficient with your procedure so that you use your time advantageously. Because when it comes right down to it, you never have enough time Never. Now that's, oh, gee, I better put some color on here. Color, no, just tone. It looks as though it's going on easily. Yes, acrylic is that way. It covers very well in one application. Also, you'll notice I'm using a very efficient brush, nice big one. Use your little one. That's why you should never have all the brushes you own at your tabaret. Just the ones you need at the time. It keeps you disciplined, keeps you. If you have a little brush nearby, you're apt to pick it up because they're so cute. If you have a big brush in your hand, you'll see big things and do the big jobs. Now, since I saw you last, I studied with Rembrandt. Herb and I went to Holland for a week. It was a special exhibition of Rembrandt's works, 50 paintings and 60 drawings, and we saw his studio, and we saw where he exhibited in Leiden, and we saw paintings done by someone who was his contemporary, and really, I did study with him. You can't paint a good picture until you've seen a good picture, and we saw a whole lot of them. And so one of the things, too, that was very obvious is that he had assistants, or he had students. They were students, and he had his students do all the manual labor. You know, he designed the picture and worked it to a certain point, and then he said, well, I'll let them do all the hard work, and then I'll just come back and touch it up. And that's what I'm going to do, because I got an assistant to absolutely almost finish this, and then I'm going to back and give it the punch that it needs. Well, I see my apprentice did pretty well. The canvas is covered with the lights and darks. I have to do some correcting. And these are my artistic choices. I see he included all the scalping, these flutes. And for the roughness of this picture, I don't think it really is a good idea. Oh, I forgot to tell you something very important about the tabaret. I always have an old Turkish towel doubled up on it, because if I dip into my water, or dip, as I am now, for acrylic, or I dip into turpentine when I work in oil, or I am painting with a medium, my brush, after it's dipped in, is so soaking wet. It's so handy to just wipe it off, and the absorbency of this fabric is really the only one to use. And it really does help to regulate the way the brush handles. That brush is really the extension of you. You should be very careful about what condition it is once it hits that canvas. And so I'm taking this big brush, and I'm going to mix up some gray. Yes, they covered that. They covered that, but this is a little bit. I'm going to make it a little lighter even. See, I think that's going to be a little bit better. And I'm going to take the scalp out. I don't know whether I'm making the right artistic choice, but I feel as though I'd like to do it that way. And then I see a shadow there, and I'm going to take it out here too. It simplifies it, stops, because even though I have my staff working for me, I'm still working under the pressure of time. The painting that I showed you that I did, I worked on, one morning, one afternoon, another morning, and another afternoon. Now that's a lot of hours compared to the little time that we have to share together. But I like sharing painting with you. So I'll just put up with the fact that it takes we don't have as much time. Affairs never have enough time. And so, remember I said how important it was to have this overlap that shadow, and they were a little hesitant about it, and I'm going to be more bold. That's what is a factor about being a beginner. You're not bold, but boldness comes from experience. So if you can't be as definite as I am, maybe it's because you haven't been painting 50 years like I have been. And here, yes, they did learn. I said, you know, it's so nice to have light going back of something to make it stand out. And I'm going to accentuate it more. And this, I make 2 on that side. And they didn't have the experience to realize that you go in and then over. And that makes it look as though it goes in back. And one of the things I was very glad that they tried to impose, that the light comes from above, so that top planes, the flat plane is lighter than the down plane. And see how simple they did this? They made that light and they made this dark. But I'm going to accentuate it and lighten it. And I'm going to make a very light thing right here, a very important light. And a very important light here and here, because they're in the same line as this vase. Now, a lot of people leave certain things for later as detail, and it's not a good idea. See this fluting of the little picture is not a detail. It's part of it's characteristic, and so it has to be embedded right away, at least as accurately, simplified, but at least accurate. And I'm glad they came down too far so I could do this by overlapping and making it go up over it. And these can't be added as details either. These little bumps. That's part of the anatomy or the character. The character of the handle. You put them on later and it wouldn't look like the same kind of porcelain. Even though this is the beginning, there's certain things you do have to pay attention to. And its base, which doesn't seem to be indicated. Yes, and since this is an underpainting, I don't have to have this as blended and as wonderful looking as it is there, but it should be a little bit softer. Why don't we start out by recapping last time we met? Because this painting is a continuation of what I did before. And this time I'm going to impart color. Remember last time we met, I only worked in acrylic and I only worked in black and white. This, maybe if I step aside and we can have a view of this painting so far, it's just the beginning, and my subject matter in line, you can see that this is void of all color, and that is really quite colorful. In fact, I think you can see that the drape is a yellowish white in relation to the vase that looks almost blue, almost something. Well, I'm not going to do them that way. I'm going to make my picture all the same color white. Why? Because I think it will tie together better. If I have this one kind of white and this another kind of white, they'll be looked at separately rather than enjoyed as an entire composition. And composition is always the forerunner or the most important factor of the success of a painting. All right, so why can't we use pure white, the pure white that we have on our palette? Because that's not what we paint. We don't use this to do this, because we use this to emulate the effect of lighting on the subject. Now, I always see a warm light. In fact, I always see a hot light. I like it that way. I always feel better in a warm environment than in a cold one. So I always put a little bit of warm color into my white. What is a warm color? Into this, I'll put anything in it that's going to make it look like a warm off-white. So I could put maybe a little bit of orange in it, but maybe that's going to make it look like orange instead of white. I could put a little bit of yellow. Then it would look like yellow instead of white. So it would be better to put this and the black together. I better tilt that this way so I don't get a glare. Put the white and the black together to make a to make an off-white, just a little less than this, and add one of these warm colors. You see, I have these bright warm colors, and I have these colors. This is yellow, orange, and red. Here's another yellow, orange, and red, but they're so low in intensity, they'll just kind of bless the gray rather than color the gray. So why don't I start and talk about color, the color white, as I paint this white composition. My underpainting is acrylic and dry. I like a warm environment. Some like it hot. And so why don't I take my rag with some painting medium and some burnt umber and some yellow ochre and get this far and put this down and add the warmth in the easiest way I know how, and that's to rub it on. I like it better already. This not only imposes some color on the whole gray rendition, it also wets it. Wets the canvas with my painting medium, linseed oil, Damar varnish, and turpentine in equal parts, which will make it seem as though my paint goes on very easily. Well, it will be going on easily. Now, where to start? I think it would be best to accent the whiteness of the drape and the picture by imposing a little bit more color on the negative spaces. So I'm going to take more burnt umber in a big brush, a little bit of burnt sienna. You'll notice I'm calling out the colors I mix because I've had so many letters that say, call out the colors you mix. I really would like to say, no, I won't, and I never will, because these colors are the colors I would use to do today under TV lighting. And TV lighting makes me have to drift away from maybe the colors I use in my own studio. So it isn't a good idea for me to call out the colors I use. But I've gotten older, and I'm more mellow now, And so if you want me to call out the colors as I mix them, I certainly will, just so that I'm a little bit frightened as to where you're going to put them. I would rather have you understand the thinking I put behind using a color, because that will really service you better as a painter. I'm getting a glare up here, getting an awful glare, but I'm using, down here I use burnt umber, here I'm using burnt umber and burnt sienna. Of course the color looks different because it looks that way because I'm working on the gray underpainting. Look how that is on white. Ooh, 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 ooh. Oh, I like that little warmer color that got on. Now, this is one way of getting a nice dark, rich color. If I put these two colors together to try to cover a white canvas, I'd probably have to use all of that paint. By putting those two, that mixture of burnt umber and burnt sienna together and applying it over an already darkened area, I don't have to use as much. And there's a certain luminosity that comes as a result of this. I think I did mention the last time we met that we were in Holland and I studied with Rembrandt, and I could see that he did a lot of this kind of thing. And I have to tell you something that proves it. We were at a museum where there was relics of the painter's equipment in the 17th century. And there we found a leather piece of square piece of leather, and and the corners came up like this, and a piece of string was wrapped around it. And in here, in the pouch part, was a nail with a head, and that was a tube of paint. And the amount of paint that was in this little pouch was about the amount that I have squeezed out right here. Right here. Can you imagine? That little pouch had just that amount, and we squeeze the whole thing out on our palettes today. So it's true. He had so little and did so much, and we have so much and do so little sometimes, unless we take up the technique that they used. And that's the technique of planning out everything in values and adding the coloration on top when you can keep your mind on color. I don't have to even think of the composition anymore, do I? I've got it all worked out. Yes, here we are. Look at this and this. These I just said I'm going to make them more the same color rather than as different as they look. And I see it against that, tan background. And I put the brown in, which is a dark yellow. And when I look back at it, it just looked too drab. So I had burnt sienna and burnt umber just without anything in it. And now I've just sneaked some white. See this white? I have that in there. And I repainted it. And you can see that it imposes a little bit more of a luminosity of color in there, which I like better. That's the whole trick about painting, is to do it and see how it looks and say, I like it. Or do it and see how it looks and say, ew, I don't like it. Well, you certainly shouldn't be discouraged. You can always fix it. You know how you can fix it? You can make it worse. But I'm sure if you have some artistic judgment, you're going to make it better, and I know you all do. So now I have a chance to start painting some color, or working not only it's already yellowish looking, working the color and more of the quality of the texture of the picture. Because this is what since I don't have to think about the drawing and I don't have to think about the position, all I have to do is think about it. So now I've taken some white, just going to wet that down a little bit. Take some white. See how white and brown gets it too brownish looking. If I put a little black in it, just a little bit of black, how gray that looks. I almost made it too gray. I'm going to put a little bit more yellow in it. Well, I have no idea how this gray, this brush is shedding a little. I don't have no idea how that's going to look. You don't either. Let's try it. To me, that just seems like a nice type of paint to mask this in with. It doesn't have to be thick. Look, I've even been wiping it down on my rag. Now, where the light hits, if light hits an area, it's going to be yellowish. Why? Because I say so. We have a warming sun. Even on a cold day, you can be warmed where the sun is shining. And so this must mean that we have a warm light. And white is going to look more illuminated if it's a warm white than if it's a cold white. But if you want to make it a cold white, sure. It's your picture. Remember, it's always your picture. You can do with it what you want. Just make it the way you think is wonderful. And I'm sure you can have that attitude if you, that could be your motivation for your painting. If you think about painting as being something that you're doing for the first time, doing the painting for the first time, and no one is telling you how it has to be. Yes, there's one person saying it has to be, and that's old Mother Nature. Everything we do, we want to make our pictures look natural. So if we want to make our pictures look natural, we have to know what nature is about. And nature has certain patterns. And the one that I want to speak about today in painting white is that nature is made of three primary colors, yellow, red, and blue. And I have to use red, yellow, and blue to paint this because nature's using it. So right next to this, I'm going to take a little bit of black and a little bit of alizarin, which is a violet. Makes a violet. Violet, you know, I'm sure we all know that violet is made from blue and red. And I'm going to try that out. I'd like it a little darker, more black in it. And by putting in this color right around here and taking a clean brush and doing another thing that is nature's trickery, opposite, in a stroke opposite from the way I painted it, I blend it in. Because nature, our nature, is a balance of opposites. And rhythm of application, or the stroking you do on your painting, is always a matter of putting it on one way and affecting it another. To make it look natural, to use one of nature's formulas. Every plane, direction that is not in line with the light is being made darker and violetish. Sometimes you need a big brush to blend it in. Well, before I get on to this, why don't I go a little bit further in developing that. See, now I can put some more white into this mixture and make it a little bit more colorful with more yellow to record the optimum of the light hitting it. Not exactly the optimum. The optimum is where the light hits it, which is right here. Oh, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 highlights all in here. I do too. I only put one because I make believe I only see one source of light. But I do see light. Well, this has to be lighter. This has to be lighter. This has to be lighter. And some of those places, too, are so much in line with the light that they'll catch a highlight. Helps the texture. Oops, too light. That's something that happens a lot of times. We see these wonderful reflections in the shadow and make them too light. I just put it in, but kept it a little darker. This. We're always charmed by the, sometimes a finger does a better job. I step to the side so that you can see what I'm doing. If this gets a little lopsided, realize that it's a lesson rather than a painting. See, I could put this in. I'm going to put that light I see in there. See it? I've pointed out. See this? That reflection. That's coming from the light hitting the drape and bouncing back. Reflection. There it is. You want to know what value it really is? I'm going to put it here. I'll do it again, here. And I put it here. That's called mud. People say, you never get muddy color. I says, well, you know why I don't get muddy color? Because the underpainting has told me what's going to be light and what's going to be dark. In the light area, I make it light and keep going lighter. And so that keeps it clean. In the dark area, I make sure I don't use the light area color. So we should always respect and realize that every picture, no matter how many years you've been painting, how many prizes you've won, you never can get away from the basics. People who are pianists learn the scales. When they get to Carnegie Hall, they can't say, well, I'm just going to forget about the scales. I learned that when I was a beginner. I don't need it now. Of course the person needs it. And so that's why these sessions, these lessons that I'd like very much to have you appreciate our lessons on the basics. Now that I've added the lighter tone where I see the light slam that drape with light, I realize I didn't impose enough color on the underpainting when I glazed it. And so I can take white and black and raw sienna and to make it, this is, see, I can see my palette through this paint. And I think it's got its name from the sound that it makes. Hear it? Hear it? Well, I think that I'm going to let my assistants finish that scumbling. They need a lesson in making a scumble work. So I think I'll let them have a hand at it. Well, I see my little helpers did a good job. And they listened to what I teach them. They added the lights where the lights strike. I told them just to fix this scumble, which they needed to do to get this, pulled together. And then they went and had a good time and added more light where the light is striking the hardest. They even fiddled around with this. They even got that lighter. Put that on. Oh, they're little devils. One thing they didn't do, leaving tough work for me, is this little bit of detail that shows up because the light can hit this bump, and then this swirls around a little bit. These little things, they're already planned for, but not in such terrible detail, and they might be accentuated with just a little bit of dark. Don't pick around on too much detail. Now, I think that we have talked about the color white before, a long time ago. But it reminds me of something that happened to me. I studied with Roscoe, as many of you know. Roscoe was my teacher when I was my very late teens, and he gave a lecture, and it was a brilliant lecture. Then, when I was about 26 or 27, I had my own art school, and I invited him to come out and give a lecture, which he did. And I thought, didn't that man get smart in those years? He gave the same lecture, but I listened to it differently. And so we always can read a book about the basics because we gather some information at the stage we're at. And then 6 months later, we're not the same person. We have experience, we're more alert, we're more aware, and then we read it and say, I understand, I get it now. Now that I have the lights and the general overall darks, I'm going to add, remember I said I don't get mud because I add light to light? I'm going to add dark to dark because here I see a darker shadow. Which gives me more. And very important, the very dark we see back under in here. The cast shadow dark. And I like to keep the darker darks up near the focal area, not just away from them. Well, this picture took about 54 minutes, and this picture took me 2 days. You can see the time is a very, very important element in the development of a picture. I decided to stick with white because I don't think we really, I explained it completely. Because it would be awfully nice if we understood how to deal with white, because then you can paint anything that's white. So now, to further our discussion and further our understanding of painting white, I'm going to do snow. Snow White. And rather than take the time to do the underpainting for you on camera, I did it ahead of time. This is an old barn, old red barn, and I'm going to make this all snow and tell you why I'm using the colors that I do. All right? Not the mixtures as much as why. Why I put certain colors down in certain areas. So, isn't it nice that it's all planned out? Wouldn't you like to start on this? The painting of it is easy. The planning is a little difficult. You can rent me. I love to plan them, and then you can paint them. I say that. So, I have to start somewhere. It would be silly to start with the white snow, because I have white canvas. It would be better if I started with the colors that I know are going to be in here and then relate the color of snow to them. So let's make the barn red. Barn red. Let's see, do I have a barn red on that palette? Well, I don't think I can use any of these. I might be able to use some of this. And why don't I start out with that? Pure color right out of the tube and put it here. Oh no. I think with the light coming from this way, I have to add the ingredient that makes the presence of light in paint, which is what? White. So I'm going to put white in it. Oh no. I like that, but see, when you put white with red, it tends to go, as I call, cool. The hottest color is orange. So where we have sunlight striking, there's always an introduction of some yellow. So I'm going to put a little bit of yellow or orange in that to make it look a little bit more sunlit. I'll try that. You never really have too much trouble with one color. It's the color you put next to it that can get you into trouble. So here, now, my underpainting is just guiding me to the composition and the drawing. And the sun is also hitting this little patch of red barn. And it's also hitting this side of the silo. The light in this particular picture is coming from the left. Now my problem is to shadow the red. And why don't I let the shadow color be introduced to what it's going to encounter here on my palette before I even get there. So I'm going to put more red to take away the white lightness and then put its complementary color green. And that's the principle that we have to learn to be able to paint any color, including white, and you'll see that when I get to the snow. I know having an underpainting almost makes this look color book style. It isn't. It isn't really. It's the composition is the focal point or your inspiration. You say, oh, see, I saw this barn one summer, and I took a photograph of it. And because of my knowledge of color, I can turn it into a snow scene, or I'm going to turn it into a snow scene for you. But so much of painting is getting an idea for a painting. I grew up next to a farm, my uncle's farm, and so I'm very interested in barns, and they remind me, they recollect the wonderful times we had catching flies in that barn and playing with the kittens in the barn. And so I have a soft spot in my heart for barns. And there's a shadow here from the barn on the silo. Okay, now, you know that that brush was bright red. I have this can, 1/3 full of turpentine or odorless paint thinner if you want to use that. And you see I'm cleaning it, getting it dry, taking all the wetness out with this towel arrangement I always have. I always have it. And now my brush is ready to, see, I'm going to take white. And look how clean that brush is. It doesn't have a bit of red in it. And I'm going to add some yellow brush. The color that seems that this low brush gets to be in winter. A little there and a little there, just to get me going. Maybe I should make that a little darker. Well, maybe I'll make it much darker. Well, I don't know what to do about it. I'm going to make it lighter. It's my picture. I think with the sun hitting here, the sun must have hit this. Yes, it did. Yes, it did. Now, the color, I think I should do the sky color next. And the snow is going to be lighter than the sky. So here's white and a little black. Oh, such a little bit of blue. Be careful of blue. It can be such a dangerous color. It can scream and scream at you. Just put some yellow in it. Ah, I like that better. Maybe I'm going to put a little bit of green in it. Phthalo green, yeah. Try it out. Try it out before I get around and putting it. I'm going to make it go right over the barn. I'm going to make it go right over the top of the silo. I'm going to make it go right into there too. Why? I think I can get better coverage by overlapping. get a more painty look. There's sometimes that I'm careful. If the paint doesn't seem to spread, wet it with a little turpentine. And I have a general overall coverage. And maybe I would like to draw more attention to the barn, and maybe I'll do that by lightening the sky here. I would never just put light things anywhere. I would definitely like to have lighter tones up against the subject matter to accent the subject matter's importance. And now the snow. Where light strikes the snow is going to be yellow. Yellow, ochre, and white. Where light can't strike the snow, it can't be yellow. It has to be shadowed yellow, which means violet. Because that's what, and you can always see blue or violet in the shadows on snow. So here it is. Gray, blue, violet. I made gray, put violet in it, alizarin, and I put blue in it. But that's not the whole story. There's always enough general illumination caused by light to have color go back into the shadow. And so in here, inside the shadow, we get yellow again. And all white things are done the same way. I don't know whether you have a good view of those two paintings I did in the previous sessions. The one on the right I did at home with a lot of time, and the other one is the one I showed you during the program. They're different whites. This one looks very yellowish in relation to one that's sitting next to it because you have a chance to compare them. But I did the same thing. I used the same principle. I made it yellow where the light struck, I made it violet for the shadow, and I put yellow back into the shadow. I'm going to do that to this barn, the snow on this barn. Yes, the snow on that barn is in shadow, so it can't be light. Most of you have more trouble finding the light and dark than finding the right color. Hate to tell you that, but it's true. Some of the snow melted off. The eave of that roof must have casted more of, oh, I can't get that darker. I may take a darker red and more green in it, and I'll get a darker shadow. Yeah, I like that better. I like that darker too. Boy, that gives it some punch, doesn't it? I'm trying to figure out, if you're a student of lighting, and how light works, you are a student of painting, because A painter makes his paint do to the canvas what the light does to the subject. Now this comes all the way down. Now if this hangs out more, and this is further back, I think this is going to be out here more. And that makes this shed look as though it has more of an eave. What a funny language. Eve just seemed as though, oh, anyway. And there's some distance stuff back in here. Oops. And a distant field of snow where the light is striking it. This is trees. Trees in the distance. Come on, try to look like trees in the distance. That didn't do it. A little bit too soft. A lot of people think that painting a snow scene, the hard part is painting the snow. I'll tell you what the hard part is. I'll tell you what I have trouble with. Now, if this is in shadow from the barn, this barn is also casting its shadow on the snow. Well, a shadowed snow is violet or blue. And so we have a shadow here up against that. Also, I'm going to have all these rocks, and there's going to be trees. That would also shadow the foreground. I'm going to paint in the snow, all in here, in dirty snow, because I would like to have it more dimension than just flat. So if I paint it in one value of white, it's going to be flat. So I put it in a darker snow color first. I can more easily add lighter tones of snow. Here it is white with ochre, to show where it's piled up. Now I need some darks. The light is coming from this way, and so this side, these side planes of these rocks are dark. Casting shadows too on the snow, and catching a lot of light because the snow hit the top of the rocks. But around the rocks were some kind of grass. Now I'm going to step back a minute and see how this looks from a distance before I show you the most difficult part of doing a winter scene. I had stepped back and noticed that I hated the roof of the barn. The roof of the barn. Just here I had all this white. I didn't have that before when I did the barn. If the barn is tipped and the light's coming this way, I have a feeling that this would be white. This would be light too. So I'm going to, I wipe that gray off, and I'm going to change this to snow-covered. And it's plausible to me that it would be that way. And then I got an idea. It would be kind of nice to stop these lines and make it look as though there were some icicles hanging down. Wouldn't that be fun to do? It's all how you look at it, judge it. It's all the same as when you taste the soup and you say, ooh, it's flat. It needs some salt. Now, those corrections done a little bit. Here is the difficult part of doing a winterscape. Leafless trees. Oh, a tree is fine with a whole bunch of leaves on it. You just make a green lollipop. But leafless trees, you have to know the tree's anatomy. And also, you have to be very careful where these trees intersect your subject. For instance, I would never plant a tree that would go along that line. That line is too important. And I also wouldn't put the tree in a way that it would divide the barn in half. So I think right there would be fine. And another tree here, and I wouldn't make them equidistant. And another tree here. And you know what? I think I've run out of time. So I'll go into trees another time with more care, because this lesson was primarily on white, not on winterscapes. I don't like to paint winterscapes. It's just too cold. On real cold days, or maybe I'll teach you how to make soup.